Portland Regional Championships has just finished up, and with that, it is the conclusion of our first official Regulation F tournament, where we saw Alex Underhill defeat Chopper Cross in Game 3 of the finals to take home the Portland Regional Championships. Now, unfortunately, our friends over at Victory Road here have not actually updated their page to show any of the results, so we are going to have to jump over to Top Cut Explorer here. But as we can see here, this is Alex Underhill's team. We'll actually click into it just so we can go get a better look at it. So essentially, Alex Underhill here has used the Power Knight team. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Power Knight is back. I will quickly say here, obviously, Alex played phenomenally. If you guys didn't see the stream, go check it out. It was a fantastic set. Honestly, Alex did get a little lucky with some crits, especially in Game 3 when his Fluttermane did crit the Dondozo that was set up with the gearing in its mouth. I'm not necessarily sure if that mattered though. I think at that point, regardless, without the crit, Fluttermane was pretty set to get a second Moonblast off anyway, and I'm pretty sure with what he had in the back, he probably was going to clean that game up. But regardless, we see here we got the Choice Banded D-Knight, a staple really on these Chanpao teams. Looking at the Chanpao 2 as well, this is just the the pretty standard set here with Ice Spinner. I'm personally a big fan of Ice Spinner right now. I think Rillaboom and Indeedee are both pretty damn good. And if you don't have an answer to Side Spam or like necessarily a great one, and as you can see here, this team doesn't have the best answers to Side Spam. Obviously, Entei's not too bad into it, and Ogerpon Water is also pretty decent. But having Chanpao there, just kind of Ice Spinner and just make sure like, hey, you don't get to spam what you want, I do think is definitely very, very good, right? But essentially, looking at this team, right, we also see, Entei, winning the first regional of the series, I guess, or the format, which is really, really cool. But also Raging Bolt picking up a win, which is, I think, very, very important too, because this is a one that a lot of people were kind of torn on. Some people were saying this was like an S tier mon, meta defining. Other people were saying like, hey, maybe it's a little overrated. But we do see here a Terra Water as well, which I do think was actually like super, super shocking as well. I've like never ran into a Terra Water one. They're normally like Grass, Electric, or Fairy. So to see, Alex win this with the Terra Water, I did think was very, very interesting. But Terra Grass, Assault Vest, Entei here. Personally, it's my favorite way to play it. I am not a massive fan of Terra Normal Entei. I feel like E-Speed's job on this team is never to deal damage. E-Speed's job is just to finish off kills. You pick up a low kill, right? You use the Flutterman, you use the Chanpao to get them low, or even the D-Knight to get them low, and Entei kind of comes in and, cleans up. I'm a huge fan of the Assault Vest set, though. I do think this is better than the Bandit set. I think this mon, is just very, very bulky, especially with the Assault Vest. So because of that, spamming Sacred Fires, spamming Snarls, whatever it is you need, I do think AV Entei is definitely pretty damn good. And then, of course, just a very standard Water Ogerpon here, and then, of course, the Chanpao we touched on already. Look, really, really cool team here as well, right? Obviously, we're seeing the Power Knight come in, and it's definitely something we'll also be looking at shortly as well, because if we go back to the list here, if you have a look at the top teams here, you see here's a Power Knight, another Power Knight, finished, on Chopper's team here in second place. We see another Power Knight here by Colin Hyo, who actually did have the same team as Alex Underhill. Joe UX9 as well also brought, his own Power Knight. So there's a lot of Chanpao plus D-Knight in this event, which I think is definitely something we're going to be touching on as we, go forward in this video, because there's a lot of it. And yeah, I think it is doing really, really well, obviously. But my biggest thing, I guess, with Power Knight is keep an eye on this kind of core dropping. I think it's a very, very dominant early format, team. Kind of similar to what we'll talk about with Chopper's team in a second as well. I think these mods do really well early when the format is still very new. But obviously, as people kind of start developing strategies, I definitely think we will kind of see it drop down in usage just a little bit. But then we have Chopper Cross's team here, right? Chopper wins this with a Dondozo team. Now, is Dondozo good? Well, Chopper Cross himself, arguably the best player in the world when it comes to playing Dondozo, says he thinks this is the best Dondozo has been literally since like the start of these games, right? Like, since obviously, in the first, 3 series, Dondozo was very, very good when there was less counterplay to it. But obviously once, we got, the Urshifu and the Tornaduses, for example, Surging Strike in the rain, even though it resists it, it goes through those buffs and it would still do, more than enough, obviously, put Dondozo into a bad position, even if it did resist them, right? So ever since, we've had Urshifu, Dondozo has definitely dropped off in usage just a little bit. But obviously, we do see here, it got second place and it was very close to winning as well. It was very, very close. I think, 1 or 2 plays go, slightly different, and all of a sudden, Chopper wins this with Dondozo. But again, looking at the team, we have the Choice Banded D-Knight paired up with the normal, Terra, Ghost here, Chanpao. Obviously, this has, been a hot topic as of late. Do you go Terra Ghost or do you go Stellar Terra on Chanpao? And both, I think, are very, very good. But clearly, these top players are saying, hey, we don't need our Chanpao to necessarily deal more damage. We just need to make sure they survive. Especially in the Mirror 2. If you see your opponent has Stellar Terra, you're pretty free just to Sacred Sword it, which was a big thing that happened in this set as well. I believe turn 1 of Game 3, Alex Underhill went Terra Ghost as Chopper Cross, Sacred Sworded it, which basically just you know, from turn one, it really, really hurt the game. So, yeah, that was definitely something to keep, you know, keep an eye on going forward, I guess. But we did kind of skip over Ogerpon Water Grass here. This was a really, really cool tech as well. I forget if it was top 4 or top 8 where this came into play. Or essentially, because it has the covered cloak, it can't be faked out, right? Which is really good, obviously, into things like Incineroar, because you'll have a +1 superpower that you can kind of just nuke them with. But it also came into play as well, I believe. Again, I don't know if it was the top 4 or the top 8 matchup. But one of his opponents actually went for the Icy Wind with their Urshifu on the board. And essentially, because of that, they couldn't drop the speed of the Ogerpon Water. And because of that, the Ogerpon Water, the Ogerpon Grass. Because of that, the Ogerpon was just able to pick up a turn before the Urshifu could pick up a kill. Sorry, before the Urshifu could attack. Granted, I do believe it actually attacked into the Flutter Mane, but it ends up living whatever came its way anyway. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. But yeah, covered cloak, Terra Grass, you know, or normal grass Ogerpon, I should say. Very, very cool tech. I actually think this is super underrated as well. Just because, like, one of the other main issues with the Ogerpons, at least the other 3 forms, is obviously their Ivy Cudgels aren't grass type moves. And we'll see a lot too as we go down here in the list, because we do actually have quite a lot of, you know, water Ogerpons to look at. A lot of them are running Power Whip just because they need that extra power to pick up things like, for example, a Normal Leech won't just kill a no bulk Urshifu, whereas a, you know, a Power Whip does. And also, you know, an Ivy Cudgel from a Ogerpon Grass will also do it, right? So very, very cool. This one was like super good into a lot of the matchups. With Speed Booster as well, from its Terra, it can one-shot a lot of Flutter Manes. Obviously, you know, it's able to, you know, outspeed and pressure Urshifus as well, which is, yeah, obviously very, very solid, right? But then, anyway, the last mon really, I'll quickly skip, obviously, to Tatsugiri. We all know what it does. This is just the very standard, you know, Terra Steel Choice Scarf set fed with Dondozo. The Dondozo was just Terra Grass, Unaware with Helmet. Very, very standard stuff. Well, actually, Helmet's not standard, but I think it's a very good meta call. But the final one here is actually the Glimmora. Now, Glimmora is one I've actually seen it rise up quite a bit, right? The Power Herb Meteor Beam set is actually insanely good. And obviously, when you pair up, you know, Glimmora with Dondozo, you really like it because obviously, you know, if you get your Toxic Debris down and you get off a Mortal Spin, and the opponent doesn't have an Amoonguss, all of a sudden Dondozo is just going to stall you out, right? It's going to protect stall you, you know, it's going to chip you down with Earthquakes, and eventually, you know, you're just going to lose the game. Because, yeah, Mortal Spin plus Toxic Debris is very, very strong. But the other really cool thing about Glimmora on this kind of team as well is with the Power Herb getting the +1 onto that Meteor Beam, all of a sudden your Sludge Bombs start doing a ridiculous amount of damage. And, you know, as we've seen with Landorus Incarnate in this format, you know, having a Poison Stab move is very, very strong. Anyway, skipping over to the top 4 teams here, we have Antonio's team here. Now, this is a really, really cool team. One of my homies, Lukey, was actually using this, essentially this exact same team as well, except his own take on it. In a tour over the weekend. I got to watch some of his games as well. This team is really, really interesting. Essentially, you have these 2 massive, you know, damage dealers in Golden Go plus Regidrago. Obviously, you know, you've got Dragon Energy, you've got Make It Rain, you know, Terra Steel on the Golden Go with Metal Coat. Obviously has Pod as well. And then Regidrago, it's just a nuke, right? If it gets off, you know, full HP Dragon Energy, you know, even a Draco Meteor if it's taken some chip, it is very, very good. And also, as we saw, you know, his matchup against Joe as well, having Earth Power is super, super good into things like King Gambit. A lot of the mons that, you know, can kind of take the Dragon moves, like the Steel types, you know, they don't really want to eat that Earth Power. But then we essentially just have 4 supports on this team, which I did really, really like, right? So, Ogerpon Waters recently have kind of started adapting, right? A lot of the support Ogerpons aren't running like the slow, bulky set as much anymore. Most of the time, they're running it a little bit faster just so they can pick up things like Landorus Incarnate, which I do think is a very, very cool tech, especially with how popular Landorus I was coming into this event. Then we also see here our first Incineroar of the event, Terra Dragon, which is pretty standard, I'd say, at this point. It's a very, you know, neutral defensive typing in this current metagame. But it has the Assault Vest over things like Safety Goggles and Citrus Berry or even Wiki Berry, which were, you know, some of the more, you know, popular things we'd seen, you know, coming out of it, right? But then we also see that they have opted to not go with Knockoff, which I did think was very, very interesting. Obviously, on the Assault Vest set, you're going to have Fake Out, you're going to have Flare Blitz, you're going to have U-Turn. They're all kind of like 100% needed. But then they have opted for Snarl. Now, this does make things like Side Spam obviously a lot easier for them, as like, you know, there isn't really any Side Spam team that wants to sit there and just eat Snarls. And especially when you have the Assault Vest, even some of the ones that are meant to deal with it, you know, for example, things like maybe Blood Moon, Ursa Luna. You know, if you just go like Terra Drag, the Assault Vest, you know, you take something like maybe, you know, 50-60%, and then you just fire off the Snarl, and then it's like, hey, no matter what you do this turn, you can't carry me. Your Earth Power's not going to do enough damage. You know, your Blood Moon's on cooldown. You can't deal the damage you need to deal this turn, right? So because of that, I do think Assault Vest is super nice. Also, too, it does kind of help out with those Flutter Manes. There's like a specific calc on Flutter Mane where I believe like Terra Fairy plus Choice Specs in the Sun just one-shots this. I've done it a few times myself. It is a really, really cool tech. Obviously, you know, it's very hard to obviously position Flutter Manes with Sun. And a lot of teams that are running Flutter Mane don't run Sun. But for the occasional, you know, like Whimsicott and Joya like myself, or even Tornadus, Sunny Day plus Choice Specs will just pick up most Incineroars. Because of that, having, you know, the Assault Vest also really helps out there. And then a very, very standard Tornadus here. It's just like bulky helmet plus, you know, like essentially Bleak Wind, Icy Wind, Tailwind. I do believe this is a little quicker because you want, basically the way you want to play this one, right, is you want the Tailwind to put your own speed up. And then if you're in a situation where like Gold and Drago need to go first, but like you're sitting across from, you know, maybe opposing Tailwind or something like that, or like, you know, like for example, like booster bundle and like the bundle like outspeed your Drago, and you need that speed drop, then obviously having the Icy Wind for like a guaranteed speed drop is obviously really, really good. I personally would even like to see something like Whimsicott in that slot with Cotton Spore. But that's just me being, you know, a Whimsicott enjoyer. And then finally, the Screamtail. Now, this Screamtail was actually really, really good. If anyone watched the games, I would highly recommend watching it. The way, you know, this player was able to just use the Screamtail essentially to support the Golden Go and Regidrago was absolutely insane, right? Because you would have situations where, like, say, you know, an X-Mon just used X move, right? Say, like, Flutterman just used its, you know, its Shadow Ball, yeah? You just, like, protect the Golden Go, right? You encore it. Then the next turn, you disable it. And now it's like, okay, crap. Now I can't hit your Golden Go with my Shadow Ball. Now I struggle. He just gets to make it rain off, right? But then there's also like the mind games of it, right? It's like, okay, shit. He just encored me. He's faster than me. He has Disable. What am I going to do? And then also as well, like to add on to it, there was a lot of situations where like, for example, the Golden Go would make it rain in front of like the Chen Pao. And then when the Chen Pao was down to its sash, it was free just to never click an attacking move until Chen Pao died to the Dazzling Gleam. Which was also really, really good. You know, we did see a situation where I think the Golden Go went Protect into Nasty Plot while Chen Pao was on the board because the Chen Pao protected against the Dazzling Gleam, and then when it went for the Sucker Punch, the Nasty Plot came out. It was really cool. Screamtail was honestly super, super sick on this team, and I think when you're enabling two massive damage dealers like Regidrago and Golden Go, it just does so much work. Like, honestly, this mon is super underrated right now, and I definitely think we'll definitely see it rise up in usage as the format develops. Then we have Colin Hire, aka Battle Room. One of my favorite people in the community. You know, I got to see him play at OCIC last year, and it was really cool. Honestly, the guy is like super cool. Not much to really say about this team. It was the exact same team that we saw Alexander Hill win the event with the only difference being Raging Bolt on this team was Life Orb and Terra Grass, opposed to, I believe it was Safety Goggles and Terra Water on Alex's team. But they built the team together. I guess a little funny story as well is Choppercross almost bought this team as well. Alex said it like in his post-game interview that he was like, hey, like Chopper like was gonna bring this exact same team as well. Apparently he was part of the group. He helped them test it. But 3 days before the event, he actually decided to go Dondozo. But yeah, so would have been really funny to see, you know, this team basically get three top 4 placements. But anyway, we'll move over here to Brandon Davis' team. So we see a Trick Room team here, you know, sneaking into the top 8 here by Brandon Davis. Now, this team, really, really interesting, right? So as you can see here, we got the Choice Scarf Dark Urshifu. I think this is a fantastic addition to any size spam team. Essentially, you know, a lot of the things that, you know, people are going to want to lead into their, you know, for example, into their size spam. For example, me, a lot of the time it's Dark Types, right? You know, I like leading Chiyu into this. What are you going to do when there's a Dark Urshi on the board? If you click a Dark move, it's, you know, like 4x resist it. And if you click a Fire move, you know, all of a sudden, hey, like you're locked into a Fire move. And now you can't really threaten the Hat who's like coming in on the back of that U-turn, right? There's a lot of cool things you can do with it, right? Obviously, you know, Choice Scarf U-turn into like, you know, something in the back. Well, Hat, you know, or Indeedee, for example, just sets up Trick Room. But also just pairs super well, right? Because again, you get into a situation where your opponent, you know, thinks like, oh, you're going to set up Trick Room, and then you just go like Helping Hand, you know, Terra Stella, Wicked Blow. Very, very interesting actually here to see them running Terra Blast on obviously the Terra Stella set. But it's not the worst thing in the world to actually lock yourself into, I guess. But I guess the interesting things on this team, obviously we see Indeedee plus Hat, nothing super crazy there. That was kind of to be expected, obviously. This is like, in my opinion, now the best size spam mode. I do think Hat is a bit more consistent than Armourouge, simply because Hat's just slower, right? You're not worried about losing to other Trick Room modes when you have Hat. The only thing slower than Hat is Torkoal, and they've got Torkoal on this team, so obviously, you know, that kind of, you know, forces some weird mirrors. Then we see the normal Ursaluna here actually getting a high spot as well. I do think this mon's very, very good. Seeing 3 attacks, though, was very, very interesting, but I do think having Earthquake is super good. And obviously, you know, when you're not running Swords Dance, you want Headlong Rush. Earthquake obviously can be kind of bad into the Rillabooms, which I do think obviously size spam teams do kind of struggle with. But as we'll see later as well, Rillaboom only had roughly about a 30% usage. So I'm sure, you know, they probably did run into some Rillabooms, but not too many. And I guess finally, to round out the team, we have the Gallade. Now, Gallade, I think, is very, very interesting on teams like this, right? Because Gallade, obviously, it gives you another Trick Room setter. It gives you a Wide Guard user as well, and Wide Guard, in my opinion, is super, super good right now. But then Sharpness, Psycho Cutter, and Sacred Sword are actually kind of busted. This mon does a lot of damage, especially if it's left unchecked. If you can't ignore Gallade on the field thinking, oh, like, hey, you know, Indeedee gonna like set up Trick Room here, or Indeedee's gonna follow me, he's gonna, you know, Trick Room. There are a lot of situations where Gallade can just deal a ridiculous amount of damage. This mon does absurd damage. But yeah, super, super cool here to see a Trick Room team inside the top 8. You know, it is really nice to see. As much as I hate Trick Room personally, it is nice to see that, you know, the archetype is still good, because it just shows that the meta is, you know, in a pretty healthy position, right? Then Joseph Ugarte, my, I believe I called him my eternal rival, and he remembered it. But yeah, now look, Joe, he's here. He's got a Power Knight team. Nothing like super duper crazy with this team, right? You know, we've got a very standard Amogus with the Grass Knot. I guess for those who don't know why Grass Knot, Grass Knot does a crazy amount of damage to Urshifus and both Ursaluna forms. I think you can even like one-shot some Urshifus if they got 0 bulk. I don't know the calc exactly off the top of my head, but I have seen it do a lot of damage. I'm pretty sure after a CC you always kill, which is definitely, you know, something to keep in mind there, right? King Gambit, the Joe Ugarte are special here. It is the Defiant Black Bastards Terra Dragon set. Pretty standard here. This Power Knight though does have the Assault Vest, which I actually do think Assault Vest Power Knight is pretty good. It is just funny that we obviously saw 2 banded sets do better. Joe here also going Terra Ghost, so if you're someone who's playing Champ Power and you're running Terra Stella, maybe take this, you know, as a sign to, hey, maybe Terra Ghost is still better. Maybe New Toy Syndrome should kind of wear up a little bit. But then finally, Joe has not Terrafire, the Ugarte Earthblade Mask. Now, this is a really cool mon in my opinion. I am shocked that this mon doesn't see more play. But as we see here, Joe does go Ivy Cudgel plus Power Whip. Power Whip, obviously, as we were saying before, gives you a lot more damage. And as much as I do love having Wood Hammer, if you're playing a redirection mon, you also probably don't want to have a recoil move. So you're going to take that 15% chance to miss. But Fire Ogre I think this mon is still really damn good. I believe there was like a 3 attack one that also did pretty damn good as well, with Stomping Tantrum. It was just like 3 attack with Tantrum as the 3rd one. No redirection, no SD. Yeah, I think this mon's super good. Don't sleep on it. You know, having that, you know, that free +1 when you Terra, it's never a bad thing, especially on the one that's, you know, pretty quick with a pretty solid attack stat. Then we have Ryan's team here. Now, this is a pretty standard team. I'm honestly surprised we did not see more of, you know, similar archetypes to this do better. Obviously, you know, we've got the Ogre Pawn Water here, again, with the Power Whip, you know, that we're touching on before. That little bit of extra damage does go a long way on this one. Obviously, you know, King Gambit here with Assault Vest plus Terra Water. I do really like Gambit with Assault Vest right now. I think it's really good. I'm a huge fan of Terra Fairy on my Gambits as well. But obviously, you know, I think Terra Water is still just a really good neutral typing. Obviously, you know, we got the Lando here. Lando Eye doing what Lando Eye does best. It's Life Orb 3 attack. Just fires off some really powerful attacks. Then we have this Hisuian Arcanine. Now, this was a very interesting one. So, I was actually talking to some of the boys today after the event, and I was saying to them, like, all right, what do we do about Power Knight? I'm seeing Power Knight everywhere again. Back in Reg E, Hisuian Arcanine was the guy. Banded Hisuian Arcanine, it can start on the board. It doesn't care. You get the Intimidate onto the Qian Power. It does like 0 damage. Even with like Sacred Sword, it does like 60, it does like 40% to you, right? And then even, you know, even if like the opponent has, you know, for example, Stomping Tantrum on their D Knight, you can say like, look, I'm going to be faster than you anyway. I'm going to hit you with a powerful attack. You've got to double me if you want a chance at killing me. You're probably not even going to kill me if you do double me. And then I'm just going to fire off like a really strong Rock Slide into you, right? But then also, right, you know, if you have a look at the Fire type Intimidators, obviously Incin is, you know, the #1 right now, yeah? What does Incin hate? It hates Entei, which is a mon that's on the rise, and also a mon that has been pairing really well with these Power Knight teams, right? Because it kind of fills that role as like, hey, I'm an Assault Vest mon that pairs really well with Qian Pao and also fixes up a lot of your bad matchups, right? Like, Entei is like, hey, you know, Power Knight, you hate, you know, Fluttermane. I'm really good into Fluttermane, right? I don't care. It's like, oh, like, you maybe don't want to go up against a certain Urshifu. Well, don't worry, with Terra, I can just, like, Sacred Fire it, and then, you know, 50% of the time I'm going to burn it. In a best of 3, you know, you got a pretty good chance of, you know, burning it twice, right? So that's really cool. But the thing is, Incin just, you know, Incin's just bad into Entei, right? And it's like, okay, well, like, you know, you can't bring your Intimidate mon against the Qian Pao, or, like, you can, but it doesn't feel as good. But, you know, Hisuian Arcanine's like, hey, I can go the Jolly Bandit set with Head Smash, and I'm going to one-shot your, you know, I'm going to one-shot your Entei, even if I'm -1. You know, I was checking out the calcs before. Even if you're like super bulky Assault Vest Entei, and you're going up against a -1 banded Hisuian Arcanine, Head Smash still does like 120%, and we're talking like 70. I think it was like 70 defense, 228 HP. So it was like a very bulky set. And yeah, and -1 just went bang, Head Smash, you're gone. Right? You pair this up with something like Rillaboom, and it's like, hey, I got the faster fake out. I'm just gonna remove your Entei before I get to play the game. Yeah, so I think Hisuian Arcanine is super underrated. There's a reason it won 6 straight events back in Reg E, and I think it will definitely kind of rise up as people think. As people kind of find, hey, maybe, you know, maybe Incineroar isn't, you know, as good as we thought it was. Maybe it isn't like this super splashable mon that's going to be on 50% of teams. And maybe, you know, if you want a fire type Intimidator, Hisuian Arcanine is the guy. Then essentially, to round it out, Latios here, Helmet, you know, Terra Steel, Ice Beam, you know, with Mist Ball here, Tailwind Recover, very, very standard set. And then, of course, just the choice specs, Fluttermane, very, very standard as well. Cool team here by Ryan, though. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of this Hisuian Arcanine. I cannot praise this mod enough. I think it is going to rise up again. And I would not be shocked if it wins one of the upcoming, you know, one of the upcoming regionals. And then finally, to round out the top 8 here, we have Jose's team. Now, look, I didn't really have too many notes on this team, right? You know, you got the Terra Grass, Incineroar. This really helps out, obviously, one, like good defensive typing into obviously water types and ground types. And then two, obviously gives, you know, a Spore immunity and Rage Powder immunity, right? Figgy Berry, to me, was pretty interesting because Citrus Berry was free. Obviously, Figgy Berry is better if you can get, you know, get it to activate. But Citrus Berry is just more consistent. But I'd be really curious to see if this is potentially something like a Surging Strikes calc. And that's why they've gone Figgy, because maybe, you know, after 2 strikes, it does, like, say, 80%, and then the Figgy will just put you out of range of the final strike. So maybe that's why they've gone for the Figgy Berry over the Citrus Berry. But look, very standard set here on the Incin. We see another Speed Booster Fluttermane just running, you know, 2 stabs plus Icy Wind. Another very standard Ogerpon here, this time opting for the Horn Leech. We see another Dark Urshifu. I do think this one is very, very cool right now. The Focus Sash variant is, like, very, very solid. And surprisingly enough, I actually think we had more Dark Urshis in top 8 than we had Water Urshis. I'll double check that after we, you know, finish up this team here. But that is definitely crazy considering I think a lot of people would probably still agree with me that that Water Urshi plus Thorn is arguably still the best core in the format. But obviously, you know, seeing Dark Urshi rise up is very good because I have been praising this one for a couple weeks now. Lando I doing, you know, exactly what we said before. And then, of course, Raging Bolt here. Again, with a safety goggle set. And this time with Terra Electric. So we do see that actually all 3 Raging Bolts in the top 8 actually had different Terras. Which was definitely very, very interesting. But they were all 3 attack as well. That was like the other crazy thing to me. None of them were Calm Mind setup, which I did think we would see a lot of. But no, we have 2 safety goggles, 1 life orb, you know, all different Terras. We got electric, water, and grass. But essentially, I guess, what are the takeaways I saw from the top 8? Well, one of them I just touched on, Raging Bolt. Again, 3 of them, none with with Calm Mind, which I did think was very, very interesting. We also only have 2 Incineroars in the top 8, right? We have Antonio's here, and then we also had, where was it here? Jose's, the one we just touched on. This one was supposed to be, you know, the best one in the format, so to only see it twice in the top 8 was very interesting. But then funny enough as well, Fluttermane, the one that had like 50% usage on day 2, only had 3 in the top 8 as well. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they were all booster energy as well, right? Actually, no, there was 1 choice specs, right? So we see booster there. Colin High was also booster, of course. Did I miscount? Oh, there was 4 Fluttermanes in the top 8. Boys, I'm blind, don't worry, it's 4, because this one was specs, right? Yeah, so specs and then a booster speed here as well. So yeah, we're seeing, I'm assuming it's a booster speed at least, because it has Icy Wind. But seeing 3 booster energy Fluttermanes actually does feel pretty good, as I am someone who also does run booster over specs. And I do contemplate that all the time, like, maybe specs is better for my team, but, you know, seeing booster there, really, really cool. I guess as well, we see 4 Power Knights in the top 8. Crazy, honestly. I'm shocked that we saw so many. And then 5 Ogerpon Waters in the top 8 as well, making it the most used mod in the top 8, which was also very, very interesting, right? And look, we could go on and on, basically, you know, through all these teams, right? You know, we see, you know, Carson here basically running Chopper Cross's team. I do believe it was the exact same team here. Lukey here actually bought, you know, like what is like a pretty standard team, but like has Gyarados. I know Neil and his building group all brought Gyarados to this event as well. Super, super interesting mon. I think it does match up pretty well into a lot of the meta. So that is like really, really cool to see. We see a Metagross here actually getting top 16, which was cool to see. You know, Assault Vest with the Brick Break, which to me, Brick Break's really interesting. Like, I don't know why you would run that when you have Psychic Fangs, but I guess they thought they maybe didn't need the ground coverage, which again to me is kind of crazy because ground like hits fire and steel, which you can't hit, whereas Brick Break only hits steel. But I'm sure there's a specific reason for it. Maybe it's the King Gambit answer actually in saying that. Maybe that's what I missed. Maybe that's how this team deals with Gambit, or at least like another option to deal with Gambit there as well. But yeah, we see some more teams here that like look just pretty damn similar. We do actually see a Giraffe here as well. I believe this is our second Giraffe, right? Yeah, because we see Giovanni Costa actually had Giraffe as well. Giovanni, did I kind of skip over their team? Giovanni's team was actually really cool. I did kind of want to touch on this because again, we see another Urshi Dark here. We see the Giraffe as well, which like insane. Again, we'll look at the usage stats shortly. But Giraffe had really high usage for day 1. I think it was top 12, and then it just fell off a cliff in day 2. Because a lot of people were kind of looking at this one as like the anti-meta one, which again is crazy to me that Giraffe was so, like, it was used so much, and we see so much Power Knight, yet Giraffe got like no really insane results, right? Like, it was in the top 8, we've got 1 in the top 16. Kind of crazy there, right? Anything cool as well? Oh yeah, so Dylan's team here, he had the Blood Moon Ursaluna here with another Giraffe. We do see the Urshi Power Knight once again here though. This was a team I actually think I saw on ladder a couple times as well. Basically like HO plus like Ursaluna and Giraffe, just saying like, hey, we do have this secondary mode you're gonna be scared of. Oopsie, went too far. But there was one last thing I wanted to look at here, which was the Rain team. Now, to me, this team was interesting because I got a question the other day because I did like a 5 underrated mons video. And I put Baxcalibur on the list. I said Baxcalibur right now is super slept on. I think this mon is really, really good in the current format. And someone said to me like, hey, could you play this mon without Ninetales? So like, I don't see how you can play this mon without Ninetales. I'm like, well, I think you could. Obviously, just Ninetales obviously makes it a bit easier. But we see Baxcalibur played on Rain here. And this is an Archaludon plus Urshi Rapid Strike Rain team. Very, very cool team here. We see that Weather Ball, we see the Hurricane, just a lot of damage coming out of the Pelipper here. Wide Guard also super good tech right now. Not to mention Focus Sash Pelipper can just go max, which I think roughly hits around 128 speed, which is very, very solid. Definitely a speed tier to keep in mind when building. But yeah, this team's just like really, really cool. It's kind of like, hey, we do have a Tailwind mode, but we can kind of also just like, mess you up in Rain. Plus, I do think Archaludon is kind of slept on right now. The Assault Vest set, obviously very, very good. Body Press can just run through teams. Having that fighting, move is just like insane. And of course, Amoonguss is just always pretty damn good, boys. But quickly here, we'll jump over to Twitter here because the guys at VGC Data, of course, they've got us covered here with the top usage ones. So as you can see here, this is day 1 of the event. Floodamane absolutely dominating the format here at 57%. We see it roughly is that 14.5%? Yeah, it's like 14.6% higher than Incin, which is kind of crazy. But then Incin's like obviously 12% higher almost than Qian Pao. And we see from Qian Pao down, it's all pretty damn close until you really start getting into the other low 20s here. Honestly, from this top 12 here, the mons I was kind of surprised by really was just Giraffe. Everything else I kind of expected to be there. But if we actually skip over here to photo 2, you're gonna see some slight changes, right? So this is day 2, right? So Floodamane, still holding up at 50%. The best one in the format, obviously, it's just so splashable. It's, stabs are insane. We see Chen Power rise all the way up to 44%. This mon is really damn good. Urshifu sitting here at 38%. Then Incin dropping all the way down to 31%. And this mon was dangerously close to like literally falling down to like what, the 8th most used slot or something by the looks of it. Yeah, like it only finished like 2.2% higher than Ogerpon Water, which was, again, the most used Pokemon in the top 8, which is definitely really interesting to see. But the major things here really is we see D-Knight, go from literally non-existent here, not even 12% usage, to its day 2 stats being at 29% usage. So maybe, that's something to keep in mind, guys. As I said earlier, I do think D-Knight plus POW does fall off as the format goes on because people start figuring out their lines into it. They start realizing like, hey, I need, these certain balance pieces to beat it. But yeah, obviously seeing that shoot up all the way up to 29% is kind of crazy. And then we actually see Urshifu Dark slide in at 20%. Again, I've been saying for a hot minute, this mon's good. So to see it, rise up to 20% usage, it's kind of crazy because again, it has a very, very solid matchup into a lot of things here, right? People are running Terra Stella for those who didn't know, because even at -1, you can one-shot Incins with close combat. Obviously, it's a pretty good mon with like things like Terra Stella or Terra Dark into Entei. You can threaten a one-shot into it, especially with like choice band sets. But honestly, it's just a really, really good matchup into like a lot of these mons, especially with the Focus Sash, right? Kind of forcing your opponent to double it does kind of make it feel, like pretty strong, because if you detect on a double up, then it's fantastic. And if your opponent, is in a bad endgame situation or something, this mon can kind of just sweep through with massive, massive damage, right? Now, also, before we kind of wrap it up, as we said, unfortunately, our guys over at Victory Road don't have like any stats for us here. But our guys, ooh, that's not what I meant to do. That's their Twitter, by the way, if you haven't seen it, Lab Mouse, go check them out. But Lab Mouse here does have, a lot of great information, right? I really like this website. It is very new still, but it's definitely on the rise. There are, like, if you guys haven't checked it out before, go check it out. There is so much information on here that you guys can go and check out, right? As you can see here, it's like, hey, we got the, top, what's it called, compositions here. You can start checking like the 3 most used. Now I do believe this is like selected on, no, it's not selected on Floodamane. I thought it was selected on Floodamane for whatever reason. We see like the most used items and stuff like that. Like, hey, 71% of teams apparently have Assault Vest. Didn't realize it was that high. Like, hey, like Terra Water, sorry, is the most used Terra. And then of course you can, you know, go through here, you see some of these teams, right? Like you get to see all their open team sheets. Very, very cool. And another like really cool thing here as well that you can do is actually kind of like, you know, search the top teams, right? Like say for example, I want to see the top 8 teams, right? We'll jump over here and this will, you know, take a second to load up, but it says like, hey, Ogerpon was the most used mon in the top 8. Then we have, you know, 4 Fluttermanes, 4 Power Knights all in the top 8. Raging Bolt also there. You can kind of, you know, scroll down from there, right? You can also check things like, say, for example, let's have a look at the top 32, right? I think top 32 is always really, really solid to look at. And we see Fluttermane once again as the #1 used mon here. But Chien-Pao is right behind it, right? So that is really interesting to see. Also 10 Dragon Knights here, 31% usage. Incin actually drops to 8th place when you're looking at the top 32 teams, which is actually really crazy if you ask me. That is kind of insane. And again, I think this is just a fantastic resource as well for when you're trying to like understand, you know, I guess kind of what to build around, right? Like say for example, I really want to build a team around, let's just say Golden Joe, right? You know, you can see here like, hey, you know, 60% of the time, like these are its 2 best teammates, at least from the top 32, right? You can see the moves used and all that kind of stuff. This is just a fantastic website. I kind of just wanted to show this off if you guys haven't seen it before. But yeah, it's also really good at just like looking at usage stats and whatnot, right? Seeing like Fluttermane, hey, it's still the king. Seeing Incin fall off quite a bit is like kind of crazy as well. Like everyone thought this one was going to be like a top 2 usage mon. You know, it's even still at like 8th place if you look at the top 16. What if we look at like top 64? Surely it rises up here, yeah? Okay, if we look top 64, it rises up all the way to 3rd. But you know, you do see here, it's only a 47% win rate. Obviously like Fluttermane is like below 50, but Fluttermane's always going to be harder because of how much usage it gets. A lot of the time you're playing against like yourself, so you're never really going to have much higher than 50%. Like when you're the most used mon in the format, it's very, very likely you'll sit around anywhere between like say 47 to 53. Where mons like Chien-Pao, where it's like, hey, I don't actually get played that much, but I'm like really good into the current metagame. You know, I kind of touched on it earlier too. Like if you have a look at like the top mons here, right? You know, Chien-Pao, you know, with the Terra Stella set, for example, could threaten one-shots on Fluttermane. It also too tends to run a bit more speed than Fluttermane as well, so that way you can threaten one-shots on it as well, especially if you've got any chip. You know, Sacred Sword into Incin still does a lot of damage. You know, it's got a bad matchup to Urshifu Rapid. Can threaten the one-shot onto Rillabooms. It threatens a lot of the common sets on Raging Bolt. Like, for example, I think Terra Grass is Raging Bolt's most used Terra. It can threaten a one-shot there. It threatens a lot of damage to Ogerpon Wellspring. While it doesn't threaten a, like insane amounts of damage to Entei, obviously it pairs really well with it. Same with D-Knight, right? You pair really well with it. Plus you can threaten one-shots. You know, if they go Terra Normal, you can Sacred Sword it. If they don't Terra, you can Ice Spinner or Icicle Crash. You know, it's really good into Torn, Amoonguss, Lando Y. Like, you know, you see why this mon has such a good win rate, especially when you look at, you know, some of the top mons. And again, you kind of see what this mon's been paired with, right? You see its moves, like only 9 Icicle Crashes with, you know, 16 Ice Spinners as well. So yeah, that's a fantastic website, essentially, if you guys are looking at, you know, looking at trying to figure out how to pair up these mons, right? But look, anyway, I'll leave a link to all this stuff down below, because there's so much information, you know, you get from events like this. Obviously, you just got to sit down and just, you know, kind of comb through it all. But yeah, anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. You know, I guess let me know what you think of this event. If there was anything cool that, you know, you're kind of surprised by. You know, maybe if you also, you know, maybe you agree with me and you think, hey, like maybe Incin's a little overrated right now. And it might also even drop off more in usage. I don't know. Let me know down below what you guys think. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.